Well, today I'm joined in the studio by Gareth Dunlop. You're very welcome to the studio, Gareth. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm rushing from appointment to appointment, but glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you today. And before we begin, I'm going to give a little bit of background on Gareth and his business. He's a seasoned speaker, is that correct?
Yes, increasingly seasoned, yes, as the years go by.
So we'll talk about that in a minute. You're a writer, a consultant, specialising in experience design, strategy, innovation and leadership. Over his 25-year career, Gareth has led, grown and sold 2 digital agencies, including Fathom, a user experience and service design agency acquired by Lo and Behold in 2021. Previously, he led Ionology, a digital strategy consultancy, and Tybus, one of Ireland's largest web development agencies. Gareth now serves on the board of .ie and has held leadership roles with the Irish Internet Association and WeddingsOnline.ie. A regular columnist for Silicon Republic, SyncNI and Business NI, Gareth frequently writes and lectures on digital strategy, and he's judged industry awards including the AIR Spider Awards and the IIA Net Visionary Awards. Okay, so we've a lot to unpick here, and it's a little bit of a world that I don't fully understand, and I'm wondering perhaps if our listeners perhaps understand your world. What did you start out doing?
I'm a little bit embarrassed in the sense that it was so long ago and I no longer do it, but I started off life as a software developer. And I graduated in 1994 from Queen's with a degree in computer science. And one of my many good fortunes in life was that my first job was for AIB Bank. And I found myself working on the project team that built Ireland's first online personal banking platform, which was launched in January 1997.
So that was incredible. You were way ahead of your time, probably.
Possibly, yes. You could put it that way. But even the younger me was sort of fascinated to be on this project and this new thing called the internet. And it was very exciting. I was young. I was a technology zealot, and this thing came along. And obviously, online banking is nothing new now. And speak to someone of a certain age, and you tell them that it was once an innovation, and they'll laugh at you. But I mean, back then, if you think about it, the only people who were customers of the bank who could get access to their account information on a computer screen were the bank's very best customers. The customers that had tens, hundreds of millions of pounds in deposit. They had a little dumb terminal called a Minitel terminal. And all of a sudden, all of the bank's customers could get access to their account information via a computer if they had access to the internet. And I was hooked. That was me hooked on the internet, and that's how it all kind of started.
I mean, it is incredible when you... I'm quite old, so I can remember a time where there was no such thing as online banking. And, even a card to use an ATM, that's how you found out what your balance was. Even that was very exciting. Before, you had to go into a branch and maybe make an appointment to see someone. So much has changed. And this digital revolution and the internet... well, it's just hard to keep up, and it's still evolving and still changing. Does that still excite you?
It does. It does still excite me. I suppose as the years go on, I do find myself turning into my dad in that, there comes a point where you get saturated with all the new stuff. It's so constant, So there's things that I sort of just don't do. I don't think I've got the patience to learn Snapchat or the time in my life to get onto TikTok. There are just things that I go, no, that's for somebody who's not me. But all the kind of businessy stuff and business innovation, I'm still as hooked on as ever.
And I'm sure so many of our listeners will be tuning in today and hoping that you can shed some light on what they could be doing better and maybe some top tips. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But let's go back to then, this entrepreneur in you as well, and you've led, grown and sold 2 digital agencies. So how did it all start there?
Good question. I mean, I think I would start by saying if you went back to my time at school, and in school and in certain years, there are always kids in a year who were always going to be entrepreneurs. The kid who bought chocolate bars wholesale and then sold them at lunchtime or whatever. There was always the kid who was going to be the entrepreneurial kid. And I really wasn't that kid. It wasn't, I don't think if you'd asked any of my former classmates or teachers, was I going to be that person? I didn't see myself as that person. But I think a couple of things happened. I mean, obviously, stumbling into the internet was a big one. I was and have always been very curious. I've always been very interested in technology. And, you know, Tim Berners-Lee did me a favour when I was at university by inventing the World Wide Web. And, and that really just opened up a whole new world for me. But I think where I really got the bug was when I moved back to Belfast from Dublin and joined a small 4-person at the time web agency, which was called Travers. You mentioned it in the intro. Yeah. And I joined on a 6-month contract. I joined a 4-person business. I ended up staying 13 years, and 4 people turned into 55 people. And I led the business for from 2002 to 2009. The business was sold in 2008. But it was in that time that I got interested in all the other elements of good technology. So I got interested in design, I got interested in people, I got interested in business cases, I got interested in selling. So I didn't know it at the time, but all of the ingredients that you need to sort of get interested in business or consider starting your own business, I was learning those as I went. So I think the seed got planted when I was working in Tybus. I became a director, I became managing director. And I thought, yes, this feels like something I can do, something I enjoy. So it kind of just grew organically.
And it was so rapid, though, and, you know, to end up with, 55 employees. Did you always have an exit strategy? Were you one of those people that knew where you were going?
Well, the exit strategy, I'll give you the quick version because I could go down the rabbit hole. I promised you I wouldn't. But the quick version is that myself and another member of the business tried unsuccessfully to buy the business outright in 2007. Which I think, I don't know for sure, but I think that possibly prompted the majority shareholder to say, we have a couple of young lads here who are ambitious to do their own thing. Something needs to change. And ultimately that resulted in the whole business then being sold on to UTV PLC. So we were part of UTV for 18 months.
I remember now. I'm having flashbacks to Havelock House, actually. I do remember.
Yeah, I get lost in the rat's maze a number of times in Havelock House. Yes. So.
Oh, well, it's very sad with the demise of Havelock House. But yes, I remember now, Tybus. So that's so interesting. And you were still so very young when you were doing all of this.
Yes, at the time I didn't feel it, but I look back now as an older man and go, yes, we were kids, we were youngsters, yeah. And look, I think what that does is, you bring the enthusiasm and naivety of youth. You don't know what you don't know. You're less scared of failing, and you just crack on.
And you talked a lot out there about the ingredients that you needed, and you obviously are a good people person. You're obviously a relationship builder, but what's coming across loud and clear is your good communication skills. So you had communication. So that allowed you to make the internet and digital and technology accessible to those who perhaps didn't understand. Would that be fair?
Yes, I hope so. And I think the other thing is, I know we're going to cover all areas of digital, and I think, and forgive me if this sounds like a cliche, but I think one of the things that a lot of digital activity boils down to is that digital is just the latest tool in a series of tools that have been arriving on the scene for decades and centuries. And some of the kind of underlying business thinking and business strategy, the search for innovation, the search for competitive advantage, the importance of differentiating, the importance of knowing your customers, all those business fundamentals, they haven't gone away. They're exactly as they've always been. But digital just brings us a new range of tools that we can apply to that. And I've always kind of seen my job as speaking the language of the person at the other side of the table, which is nearly always a businessy language, but just marrying that up with the digital tools that I know that they'll need to meet their business goals.
So the business need, and I suppose different tools for different needs. If there's somebody listening now and they feel like they're a bit apprehensive, we've got AI, it's digital overload at the minute, really, and knowing where to put your money and your time and your resources, what would you be saying to them? How would you tell them to build in a digital strategy to their business?
I think there's a couple of things I would maybe say. I think the first thing I would say is if you run the following thought experiment, if you have $100 to spend, don't spend your $100 evenly across all your options. So if there's 5 things you could do, don't spend $20 on all 5 things. There will almost always be things that you should overinvest in because they're most appropriate or most suitable to your business. So if you'll indulge the analogy, spend $80 on this thing, spend $10 on this, and spend the rest of your money on these other less important things. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of businesses make when they think about how they build and integrate digital into their overall business operations is that they feel they need to do everything. They don't have the confidence to say no to certain things. And again, one of the tenets of business strategy that I would always believe, and it's not my quote, I think it's Michael Porter said it, strategy is what you don't do. And I think for me, good digital strategy says we're going to invest heavily in A, B, and C because it's sound. But as a result of that, we don't have time or resource or effort to put into D, E, and F. So I think prioritization is a big thing. And the other thing I would say is you've really, and again, forgive me if this sounds like the kind of thing you'd expect someone in my shoes to say, but you've got to build it around the customer. And the reason that's particularly important in digital is because if you and I meet face to face, or you and I meet in a physical environment, or we meet in an office, or we meet in a retail environment, there's a human element to our relationship. There's a human element to our conversation. So if you're coming into my store and you're wanting to buy something, if I'm good at listening and I can ask good questions, I'll work out how I can help you very, very quickly. But in the world of digital, it's not human to human, it's human to computer. You're engaging via an app or via a website or via a different device. And sometimes that human element can be lost as a result of that. So don't lose sight of your customers, don't lose sight of what it is that they want, why they buy from you, why you're unique to others. Make sure that you understand what your customer needs from the interaction before you embark on any design, development, or digital activity.
So that's really the user experience, and you would talk a lot about user experience. And I just looked at your website there, and you said before a user can complete an action, they must want to do it in the first place. Too much user experience focuses on viability to the detriment of desirability. That's a good quote.
Well, thank you. It's a hobby horse of mine, and it's easily illustrated. So let's take a high desirability product. Taylor Swift tickets. Mm-hmm. So if you're on a website, you're looking for Taylor Swift tickets, most people who I know who have been in that situation, they will go through hell to get their hands on those Taylor Swift tickets. So even if the usability is terrible, as it often is, because you've got to have a phone and 2 browsers and the whole family's on the laptop to try and get these precious tickets. So desirability could not be higher, so you'll go through usability hell. On the flip side of the coin, let's take a real commoditized product such as ink cartridges or iPhone covers. So real high availability, high commodity products, relatively low desirability. The site that you sell those on has to be unbelievably usable, unbelievably easy. And that's why most of those products are sold via platforms such as eBay and Amazon, because those platforms are unbelievably easy and straightforward. One click, yeah. Exactly. And so, but what can happen sometimes in the world of user experience is that organizations over-fixate on usability. How can we make buying this product easier? And we should ask that question, but we shouldn't lose sight of the other question, which says, how should we make our products more desirable through digital? So the desirability of the product and the usability of the experience, those kind of things work hand in hand.
So does the focus have to be on marketing?
Yes, yeah. And some of it, marketing in its general sense. So sometimes that desirability and that marketing piece can be very sober. So it's things like crystal clear product descriptions, it's really good product photography, it's really good articulation of what the offer is. But sometimes that stuff can be less sober, it can be more emotional, it can be more persuasive, it can be your traditional brand marketing, it can be customer testimonials, it can be testimonial videos, some of that softer brand piece as well. So again, those two things I think work hand in hand.
And do you have to spend a fortune on your marketing?
You don't. What I always say is you need to market like the world's best marketers, but without having their budget, because we don't have their budget. Mm-hmm. But what the world's best marketing organizations have, if you think of the organizations that do this like really, really well, organizations that generate both high desirability but high usability, it's hard to get past the likes of Apple when you're talking in those terms. There's lots of ways that they go about their marketing efforts, and there's lots of ways that they think about marketing that we absolutely should mimic. Now, very few folks listening to this, I would imagine, are running billion-dollar organizations. So I'm not saying that we need to marry their budgets or have their budgets, but I am saying that the techniques and the approach and the customer centricity that they have in terms of how they understand, how they communicate and relate to their customers, that those principles are exactly right for pretty much every other business.
And where do you stand with the whole influencer role? Can we take a break?
So I think you're well. No, actually, I'll answer it honestly. You're probably asking the wrong guy who's the wrong age. Let me answer that as positively as I can. Across lots of industries, I think there are fabulous influencers, really thoughtful, highly researched, articulate thought leaders and authors who put a lot of time and craft and effort into what they write, who research extensively, who have really curious minds, and who spend days, weeks, months, years producing high quality output. So in my industry, the world of digital strategy, the world of user experience, I could name 10 or 15 influencers whose work is really, really good, and when I have time, I always read it or engage with it. So influence is really important, and even if you look at how you increase a digital footprint or how you get prominence in the world of digital, you do need to bring something to the party. You do need to bring some form of thought leadership. You need to bring some credible influence if someone's going to believe what you're saying over what someone else is saying. So in that sense, I am a big believer in influencing as a discipline. I think
Would you be an influencer yourself then?
Possibly to an extent. I think
Yeah.
I think that's for others to answer. Lifestyle influencers, I'll just maybe not say too much about.
But I suppose they do a job as well, and they deliver, and there's desirability for what they're offering. Sometimes I click too often. But let's move away from that. You're working primarily in consultancy and speaking roles now. So are you travelling far and wide with your speaking opportunities?
Yes, I am, and I suppose having just cast a sort of a somewhat judgmental eye over thought leaders, I need to be careful how I answer. But yes, I am. Funny, I keep a tally. Over the last decade, I have spoken to, I think, around 2,500 people in 15 countries. So I have got about now. Quite a bit of that was to do with a relationship that I've had for a long time with an organisation called the UX Design Institute, who run unsurprisingly training programs in the world of user experience. But it's them who have dragged me to places such as Brussels and Amsterdam would be the common European ones. I've been in Sweden, in Stockholm. I've been in Oslo. I've been in Bangalore.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Which, so exciting.
It is.
And whenever you do these speaking, I know it's work, and quite often I've seen other people say this, you could just fly into somewhere and you could be anywhere. You're in a big convention centre, you deliver your speech and you go home. Do you always tie in a little bit of culture around your work?
I am getting better. So back when I was running the agency, I just didn't have time. And unfortunately, and I'm sort of a little bit embarrassed to say it, unfortunately, I would regularly go to a city, taxi to the hotel, eat in the hotel, do my thing. I'd maybe venture out for dinner one of the nights, and then I'd just finish up my last day and go home. But look, fortunately, now that I'm out of agency world and I only have my own backside to look after, I do have a little bit more freedom and space. So if I want to stay in and take in a little bit of culture or enjoy a little bit of nightlife, I can do that as well. So I'm getting better at it. So
you've left the agency world behind then?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Never say never.
Well, I mean, I'd never say never in the sense that I don't think I'll start another business, but I might. None of us know what the future will bring. But if I do start another business, it won't be an agency. Agency life has been really good to me. I've made my living out of it for 25 years. But the agency model as a way of making money is under more pressure than I've ever known it in my whole career.
Ah, right. Okay, so that's really the reason.
That's part of it. Yeah, it's just a tough way to make a living, and a lot of communications, and again AI plays a role in this, but a lot of communications are becoming, not that they're becoming commoditized, but it's easier to do good enough communications these days, and agencies are having to work increasingly hard to meet the needs of customers who have got ever-increasing expectations.
Do you feel then that those agencies are perhaps one of the areas of work that could become obsolete because of the introduction of AI and the ChatGPTs, etc.?
I don't think obsolete, but certainly I think it could be condensed. I think the number of people working in agencies or the number of agencies that we have could go down.
Or how do they pivot as well to maybe change what they do and how they do it?
Correct. Exactly right. I mean, I always, again, in the 25 years I've been involved in this world, agencies have grown up and disciplines have arrived that just didn't exist 10 years previously. And funny, a couple of years ago I was asked to speak at Prize Day at my old school, and I wasn't sure what I would speak about, but what I ended up speaking about was the fact that I make my living from a job that didn't exist when I was at school. There was no such thing as web design, Search engine optimization came along, and then paid search and paid social, and then influencers. So AI's come along. So there are always new things that influence new agency opportunities and new flavours of agency. So there will definitely be pivoting.
Where did you go to school?
The mighty Antrim Grammar.
The mighty Antrim Grammar. What was it like going back?
Really weird. The thing that was most difficult was you realise, so you've been invited back, which is lovely, and you go, I need to say something of some form of relevance here. And I could go and just bore everybody rigid for 15 minutes, but that's not going to achieve much. And then you're forced with, okay, you're getting one go at this. What are you going to say? So funny, I found myself, I don't usually get nervous when I speak, but I was nervous enough on that. And then there's a few old teachers, going, what are you doing back? I thought we'd seen the end of you,
And then what did you do to get into that? What does this audience need from me? Did you imagine yourself as that young person sitting in the audience looking at you?
I did exactly. And it's like, the 16-year-old me looking at some old guy on stage talking about something, how's that going to resonate, or what's that going to, Now, fortunately, I had I did have access to PowerPoint, which allowed me to show a few photographs, and so there's a few laughs, including some bad old photographs of me from the 80s. So
a few good hairstyles in there.
Oh yeah, not great, really not great.
Well, I'm sure that was wonderful, and I'm sure the school must be so proud. I think that's so interesting too, that the job that you have even now, you probably would never have thought you'd be sitting in a podcast studio talking to me about all of the things that you've done and achieved. Did the young people talk to you afterwards? Did they ask questions? What was the sense of the jobs that they were going into or wanting to do? And are they quite cool with that they don't know what the future holds?
Yeah, well, it's so funny. So if you were to ask me what was the thing I was trying to communicate, I think the thing I wanted to say was, if you're a kid here and you know what you want to do, then good on you. Like, brilliant. It's not easy to know what you want to do when you're 16. And if you're a kid who is one of the, I'm going to call them the smarter kids, and the path is laid out for you that you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, that's not the only path. That's not the only way you can express your intelligence. And if you're a kid who doesn't have a clue what they want to do, that's totally okay, because that's the kid that I was, and that's actually most people. Most of us are still trying to work out what we'll do when we grow up, and here we are.
So what career advice did you get at Antrim Grammar at the time to steer you on some path? And obviously you went in to become a software engineer, so was it IT, computer science you went into, or what did you actually do?
Yes, it was. And again, I think you have to remember that in the 1980s, IT wasn't mainstream in any way.
No.
IT was for geeks. You couldn't simultaneously be into computers and have a girlfriend. Those two things were mutually exclusive. Now times have changed. It's now cool to be a computer.
It's really cool to be a geek.
Yeah. So back then, I suppose I was interested in computers, and I was probably one of the career guidance person's easier kids to talk to.
So the computer teacher loved you.
I love the thought that he might be listening to this.
What was his name?
Mr. McQuillan.
Hello, Mr. McQuillan. Here's your star pupil. Hasn't he done well?
I'd say he's despairing. Honestly, yeah, sitting at the back of fourth year. But anyway, yeah, so Mr. McQuillan, yeah.
My goodness. And what have you learned along your journey and your career path that you could share with listeners today? What have you learned about yourself and maybe how you cope with challenges?
It's funny, I spent a little bit of time thinking about that question as I was getting ready for this today. I find it quite difficult to kind of look at myself in the third person. I'm not great at assessing myself from a distance. So, if you were to ask, what do I think, what characteristics might I have that have been useful? It's not always easy, but I do think there's a few that I might have. I think I'm curious. So those who know me might say it's nosy rather than curiosity, but they may be both the same thing. So I am curious. I think I'm resilient. So I'd love to say that the path of growth in both businesses was like this, but we both know it was probably a little bit more like this, and that requires a certain degree of resilience. And look, I think I'm not shy of hard work. I'm happy to work hard, and I think anybody who runs a business and who has a degree of ambition will recognise that just grunt work, just working hard regularly all the time, consistently, is a big part of making that work.
So if you do get a shock or something difficult happens, you've said you feel you're resilient. Does that just happen automatically, or do you have to work at it?
I think it's a little bit of both. So I mean, I think there are definitely people who are more or less resilient naturally. So some people have got really thick skin. You know, some people can just deal with the knocks really quite well, and others are more sensitive. I'm probably quite sensitive. I think what helps me kind of stay resilient is so I would read a reasonable amount around stoicism and philosophy, and so I'm sort of interested in that, you know, and just the fact that actually everybody else's life is just as complex and complicated as mine. So I'm not having any uniquely bad times. Everybody has them. So that helps as well. And I suppose just staying focused on the goal and a little bit of sporting cliches, you know, what's your next job? What's your next job? Something doesn't go right. What's the next thing you have to do? Go and do the next thing you have to do. So it's easy when I sit here now. I don't think there's any particular pressure on me as I speak to you right now, but it's tough when there is pressure and you're maybe having a bad quarter or sales aren't what you want or you're having difficulty with a member of staff. The pressure's real. You do feel it. You can bring it home, you know.
And can you step away as well? Do you take time out of work? Do you look after yourself? Self-care again is something that everyone's talking about.
Yes. Again, I think I'm better at it now that I'm out of the agency. Agency life was full on, and while I wasn't bad at switching off, you know, the laptop would have come on holidays. It would come out at weekends. I would never have done non-essential or non-urgent stuff when I was on holidays, but it needed to be done, and it was often done. So I would have been full on then. Now, the great thing about being out of the agency is that I do have a little bit more free time, so I am able to get away on trips a little bit more. I do a bit of cycling. So I'm able to travel and ride my bike in various, you know, in different parts of Europe and all over, and I quite enjoy that. So I do okay, yeah.
It sounds like you've got a good work-life balance. I'm not going to say perfect because perfect doesn't exist. Where do you see yourself going next, or what do you hope the future will bring for you?
Good question. It's quite interesting. It's a great philosophical question to ask when you don't really have a desire to grow a new thing. You know, I've been involved in business for a long time. I've grown businesses as you know, but I'm at a stage now where I do want to keep working and I want to keep doing good work, but I don't feel the need to build anything. So I'm doing quite a bit of training in the world of digital strategy and user experience. A little bit around a topic called design thinking. I do some coaching and mentoring. So there's people who are running agencies today who are asking the old guy, you know, please help me not make the same mistakes you made. So I'm doing some coaching and mentoring. I'm enjoying that.
You're hardly that old.
Older than them.
What age are you?
53.
53, well,
So, yeah.
you've aged well. Yeah, so, and the coaching and mentoring is going well?
Yeah, yeah. And then the final thing, I'm doing a reasonable amount of sort of speaking and keynote work as well. I'd like to do a little bit more of that, and I should probably take some of my own medicine and be a little bit more focused and secure in some of that stuff. I've been quite relaxed about the work I've taken on since I left the agency, and I find I'm just doing a sort of a mishmash of things, and I should probably just be a little bit more focused around the speaking, because it's something I want to do a lot more of. Do
you love it, or does it challenge you?
Both.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know, I love the discipline of being forced to have an opinion, to take a position on something that's difficult. So whether that's, you know, all of the things that we talked about, digital strategy or user experience or mobile or artificial intelligence, I really like having to churn through all the information that I have in my head and ask the question, well, what's real, or what does this matter? How does this apply to this audience? And then go and sort of take them on a journey, tell them a story that allows them to kind of take some actions to apply it. So I do like the challenge, yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking you must have put a lot of time into preparing all of the different talks, but do you find now there's sort of like a suite of products on the shelf that you can then adapt and tailor, so maybe the prep's just not as great as it used to be, or do you always give, you know, 100% to every speaking opportunity in terms of the prep?
It's somewhere in the middle. So I do. It's funny. I think visually, and I would regularly I'd see something, I'd read something would catch my eye, I'd be interested in it, and I would just prepare a couple of slides on that thing. And so I've got this sort of library of slides. I've got a library of hundreds and hundreds of slides that just tell a little story or add a little angle. And so when someone asks me to speak, I go to my slide library and I say, well, what's going to help me tell the story? So the talks are built from scratch, but there's a little library of stories and bits that I can just drag in as I need them. So
what do you think makes a good talk?
Again, forgive the cliche. I think you've got to take an audience on a journey. I think you've got to capture their imagination, or you've got to set the context or the premise really early. So I think you've got to say something controversial or something that will get their attention, or something that will make them feel something. Either they go, I really agree with this guy. Why don't more people say this? Or this is the biggest load of rubbish. How dare he say this? So I think you need to start by grabbing.
Bit of shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of context setting, and then I think I would typically go for a shock, grab attention, a little bit of context setting, start to get a little bit of research basis or a little bit of storytelling around why you take that position, and then some takeaways. That tends to be the arc of what I try to when I'm speaking.
And the storytelling, do you talk from a personal experience? Because I know people say that vulnerability is often, a good secret sauce in a presentation.
Yes, I've got any number of stories. So some of them are mine, or some of them are to do with me, but lots of them are to do with maybe just creative ways of sharing research. One of the great things about making your living from observing human behaviour, and a lot of innovation is based around on observing and understanding human behaviour in the current moment and how that applies to the future. One of the brilliant things about that is that humans are just so irrational and erratic and make decisions for so many different reasons that there's just 100 stories that just go alongside the fact that understanding actual human motivation and behaviour is really quite a difficult thing. Gosh. And the organisations that innovate well into the future are those who really get below the surface level behaviour or the surface level survey feedback and understand what's going on under the surface.
So how long have you been monitoring human behaviour now, and how much has it changed, or has it changed?
Again, I didn't know this at the time, but when I was at university, this was back in the day where, first of all, it was free, and secondly, in first year and second year, you could take modules that weren't directly connected to your course. So I did, while I graduated in computer science, I did psychology in first year and second year, so I did half computers, half psychology. Now, I wasn't to know at the time, but actually fast forward all these years, and that's probably how I make my living today, just that combination of computers and humans.
Absolutely, in that title, that's interesting to people, what makes people tick, and then, what you can do about it.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So I'm just thinking now, what advice you would be giving to the business owners that are tuning in today, looking to build their business. If you went and you helped them in a consultant's role, what would that look like? How would that take shape?
It usually starts by just asking, and I've got a little pro forma that I often use, but I always just explore what the person's personal and professional ambitions are, because I just think people are so differently wired. So for some people, running and I'll just make these kind of businesses up. For some people, running a £1 million agency that pushed off profit of 200k a year and does really good work, that's success. But for others, they might be much more motivated by financial reward, and so they want to grow some 10 or 50 million pound business and get some big pay someday in the future. So I'm always very interested in the personal motivations of business owners, because I think that's the thing which drives everything. And I think particularly for organisations that are either fully owned or majority owned by an individual, I just think it's impossible to separate that person's personality, their life goals, their personal values. I think it's just impossible to separate those things from how the business gets constructed and how the business gets run. So I start by asking them what they want. We begin to map out, if that's the thing you want, what does that look like in a year, 3 years, 10 years? What are your short, medium, long-term goals? And then we just look at, what's the plan that we need to put in place to get there? What are the parts of that plan? Which of those relate to your strengths? Mm-hmm. Great. Use your strengths well. Where are your weaknesses? Okay, how are you going to plug the weaknesses? So it's a relatively logical engagement that I have with people, and in a sense, I'm just trying to help them see themselves from the outside. And I give advice when it's asked, but very often it's just facilitating conversation. And nearly always, the folks that I'm engaged with, they have the answer in there somewhere. It just needs surfaced.
And that's the coaching skills that come out. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about design thinking, because I've heard that term before. What exactly is design thinking, and how can it complement or add to a business?
So Design thinking is connected to the comment that I made a few minutes ago about just how difficult to predict and how occasionally irrational human behaviour is. And design thinking is a technique or a process which acknowledges that when a group of people sit down to make a decision, there are all sorts of influences around that decision which can lead them to a bad outcome. So I'll give you some really quick examples. So let's say a group of 6 people sit around a table, and there's a decision that they need to make, or there's an innovation that they need to pursue. There's all sorts of social constructs, which mean that people may not say what they feel, or that people who have a less knowledgeable view of the challenge have a louder voice. So I'm sure we've all heard the term hippo, highest paid person's opinion. Very often the hippo gets their way, not because they're the expert, but because they've got a degree of seniority. You've got personality traits. So introverts are regularly at least as important as extroverts, but in a meeting, very often the extroverts are the ones who speak. As well as that, there's pressure to say the right thing. There is pressure not to ask a question which might be perceived as stupid. So there's this elephant in the room. Everybody can see it. It needs to be addressed, and no one's saying it because they think everybody else. So design thinking is a methodology that identifies all of the reasons that bad decisions get made, and it's a way that an organisation can go through a logical process of decision making in pursuit of an innovation.
And do you see great results when a company implements design thinking?
Yes. And those results are often, and I'll go back to my $100 analogy. The biggest impact of design thinking is that as an organisation moves towards putting a solution in place, they have confidence that they're putting their $80 in the right solution. They don't have to hedge their bets. So design thinking would do things like, it would help an organisation work out. So let's say you go through a process of decision making and there's 4 ways you could go. Design thinking helps you find out inexpensively which of those 4 is most likely to succeed. So you can sort of try number 1, does that work? Not great. What about number 2? What about number 3? Oh, that looks promising. What about number 4? Not great. So
it's options.
Yes. It's options, it's early validation, it's early to market, it's a minimum viable product, it's making sure you explore all the avenues, that you don't close down good options early on. So it's just a whole series of techniques that allows a project team to stay curious, communicate honestly, be open about the options, agree how success is going to be measured, and ultimately come to what they think is going to offer them the best chance of success in the market.
So does it work best when they've got something that they need to achieve and they have a real goal or a real solution they need to find? Is that when it's good to bring in somebody who can work on a design thinking solution or a mindset?
Yes, and you don't necessarily need an external person to do design thinking. Now, it can be good to have a facilitator because it can be new
and neutral.
Yeah. But design thinking as a discipline has been, a lot of organisations have been trying to embed it because its benefits lie beyond purely innovation. Its benefits lie in improved culture, improved team alignment, improved communication and things like that. So there's different benefits that it brings.
So what personal qualities do you believe have been most crucial to your success to date? We touched on a little bit earlier, but given that you understand personalities, you understand mindset, you understand whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or what bits your strengths and your weaknesses, talk us through what personal qualities you believe you have that help.
So I covered a couple of them earlier. I think resilience. You could also interpret that as belligerence. It's somewhere in the middle between those two. I think those are both there. I work hard, as I said. I think I can sell. If you can't sell, you don't eat.
You're very persuasive.
Thank you.
You are.
So I think I can sell, and again, if you're on an agency and it's ambitious and you want it to grow, you got to be able to meet people, understand their business problems, and sell. And those would probably be the key. I don't think there's any other secret sauce really.
Yeah, and you understand the why of what you do. How do you manage risk and uncertainty?
This might sound counterintuitive for someone who has been involved in business, but I'm actually relatively risk averse. I'll give an example. My parents, when we were teenagers, my father was an architect, my mother was a nursing officer. When we were teenagers, they gave up their jobs and remortgaged the house to start a business. And I just go, I can't get my head around that, I started Fathom when I was 39. The kids were both in primary school. So there was a degree of risk, but it was nothing like the risk that my parents took on. I think the other thing about agency life is that you don't have to invest a lot to get in the game. So, if you're running an agency, if you have an office and some people and some desks and a website, you're kind of up and running. And if you've got contacts and a network, you've got a couple of advantages there. So an agency business isn't the kind of business where you have to spend £1 million before you've seen a penny, So I think all of those things together have allowed me to kind of manage risk. I think some people, I think if I'd had a coach, they might say I should have been a little less risk averse, but it worked for me. I've no regrets in that sense,
What do your parents make of everything that you've achieved?
They're very pleased. Yeah.
Did they understand what you were going into at the start when you had this entrepreneur son that was taking a lot of risk?
I have a very entrepreneurial brother as well. So
what does he do?
He runs the family business. So the business that they started, he now runs. So yeah. It was two quick things about my folks. I mean, the great thing, if my folks were ever asked, what does Gareth do? The answer was always, he does something to do with computers. Yeah. So that was as close as that got. But my dad said a lovely thing. 2016, we won the Golden Spider Small Agency of the Year in Dublin, and actually it was two Belfast agencies that won it. We won Small Agency, and a business called the Web Bureau won Large Agency. So it was a nice sort of swoop for Belfast agencies. But I was talking to my dad that weekend, and he said when he heard the news, he said he felt like he'd won the award himself. Oh, which is lovely.
Well, that was really nice, isn't it? Yes, because sometimes it's hard. That generation, maybe they didn't do a lot of praise or whatever, but deep down that meant a lot. We're talking as if you're in your 90s, but you're only in your 50s. But looking back so far, is there anything that you wish you'd done differently on your journey?
I've got a couple of, I think there's a few tactical things I wished I'd done differently at Fathom. So I sold the business in 2021. We became part of Lo and Behold. And there were a number of things that they were doing in sales that I wish I'd known a bit more about. Two things in particular, they would have ran round tables, invite prospective customers in and talk about a subject of sort of mutual interest. And that had an impact. And they also hired a sort of a lead generation agency, a sort of a pre-sales agency to get more leads in the door. Mm-hmm. So I wish I'd been a little bit more adventurous around that. I think I've got a few. If I had my time again, I would definitely do that.
But do you think you didn't understand what they were doing at the time, or?
They were just two routes to market that I wasn't familiar with.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think certainly from people that I've spoken to since, they're effective routes to market.
Listening.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose with having a digital expert in the room, I really must ask you what you see as being the biggest trends driving innovation over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, so artificial intelligence is the obvious one. I think it's kind of turned the world on its head. Obviously, we're just in the middle of a massive hype cycle. And the thing with hype cycles is we can be confident that it's hyped, so it's gone too much. So we don't quite know where it will recalibrate, but we do know that something very significant has happened. Certainly in terms of the synthesis and understanding of enormous amounts of information, and a lot of professional services jobs, coding, accounting, even legals to an extent. Large amounts of those businesses are going to be replaced, no doubt about it. So artificial intelligence is going to drive an enormous groundswell of innovation. And then I think just in behind that, you've got a lot of there's big stuff happening in the world of financial technology, the world of payments. I think there's a lot happening in the world of medical technology. I think the fact that we now have wearables that can really monitor most vitals. And I think that's just going to, and so marry that up with pressure in the NHS, and somewhere in the middle of that, there's almost definitely going to be technology-led innovations that are going to help. So I think a lot of those big ones are just going to be closely connected with. They're going to be technical innovations, and I think the ones that succeed are going to maybe go back to where we started, which is going to be the ones that properly understand human problems, diagnose human problems, understand customers and people. And build solutions around those.
It's a real cataclysmic change, isn't it? I mean, this in terms of, you said it's something significant has happened, but how significant when you look at other key moments in history and innovation is AI?
metrics that's often used when answering that question is the time taken to a certain number of users. So, and the chart that you often see is whatever that number might be. Let's say that number is, let's say 10 million, and you look at how long it took television to have 10 million regular viewers, and then the internet came along. How long did the internet take to get 10 million, regular users? And then search engines came along. How long did it take them to get to 10 million? And then YouTube came along. How long did it take? And Facebook came along, and then And every new innovation, the time to huge numbers of people goes down and down and down and down. And AI is just the next in that series of, so in particular the explosion of OpenAI, it was the arrival of large language models really, and ChatGPT that just opened all of that up. And they got to those numbers within days rather than weeks or months.
Does that still excite you, or are you scared of it as well?
I think there's a bit of both. I think it excites me because it gives us an ability to interrogate the full vault of human wisdom in a single place. So, so ChatGPT and other large language models, they effectively absorb the internet at a moment in time. All the knowledge in the internet, they absorb that, and you can now interrogate that just by speaking to it, which blows my mind, and I think is full of potential. Now, on the flip side of that, the difficulty is that when you absorb all of human knowledge in the form of the internet, that comes not just with human strengths but with human frailties. It comes with bias. It comes with racism. It comes with sexism. It comes with all the things that are wrapped up in that content, and that's going to be a big challenge. I think wrapped up in that as well. Then there's going to be issues around privacy and copyright. So, and again, I'm sure you may be aware there are copyright cases emerging right now, where the copyright owner has had their content subsumed into a large language model, subsumed into ChatGPT, for instance, and ChatGPT is using their copyright to power their business. Just
regurgitating it out there, yes, without any acknowledgement.
Yeah. I would read reasonably widely in this. I think the most encouraging thing that I read is there was 3 years ago the BBC Reith lectures that was on artificial intelligence, and the guy who gave the lectures, and I hope you'll forgive me, I can't remember his name, but he was optimistic, and he said the reason that he was optimistic was, he said, we a number of decades ago we invented chemical weapons, and the world got together and said, these are really terrible things, let's agree together that they're never going to be used. And somehow that has held firm despite all the pressures in the world. And he says we need to have the same global commitment to the worst vagaries of AI. We need to get together and say, here are all the bad outcomes that can come from AI. We need to collectively agree we're not going there. And he was optimistic because he said, look, if we can do it with something as fundamental as human survival and defence, we can do it with this. And I hope he's right.
I hope he's right too, absolutely. Wouldn't you love to come back and have this conversation in 10 years and see where we will be and what will have happened? This is just a little capture today, a little, I suppose, time capsule, isn't it?
Yes.
And everybody will be listening. Who knows when they're listening, but who knows what's happened. But anyway, Gareth, it has been so amazing to talk to you for the past 50 minutes. I have one final question for you, and it's the question that I ask to all of the guests sitting where you are today. It's about the purpose of this podcast, which is, of course, to inspire existing business owners and ambitious entrepreneurs to grow their business by offering an insight into the success of businesses such as yours. But what advice would you give to people who may have a business idea but have no idea where to begin, or are unsure as to whether the risk is worth taking?
I think I'll answer that in two parts. I'll answer the second part first. Is the risk worth taking? It's a really personal question, and I suppose when the question is asked of an entrepreneur, the expectation is that the entrepreneur will say, yes, take a risk, it worked for me, have a go. Mm-hmm. But there's no doubt about it that the highs are really high, they're great, and the lows are low. And I suppose you just need to be aware of the journey you're about to get on board. I have zero regrets, no regrets whatsoever. The journey's been fabulous, wouldn't change it for anything. But it's important to note that it is tough. So it's a very personal question. If you're not doing it because you're scared, please do it anyway. It is better to try it and fail than not try. So if you don't want to do it because you don't have the work ethic or you have other priorities in your life, that's fine. But if you're not doing it because you're scared, do it. But the second thing I would say is much more practical. I just think there's loads of really good support around, whether that's Invest in I, it's no longer Invest in I, whether that's the Go Succeed programme, whether that's sort of local enterprise centres and dotted around the place, or whether that's even something like the Catalyst, formerly known as the Science Park in Belfast, which have got a really nice kind of innovation facility up there as well. There's lots of places you can go and speak to people free of charge, no obligation. Go have coffee with people, ask them what it's like, and get some basics from them. So I would
absolutely.
Yeah.
They'll know the answers. Gareth Dunlop, thank you so much for being a guest on the Public Eye podcast. Good luck with what's ahead. Where's the next speaking engagement?
I'm leaving here. I'm heading to Dublin. I've got some time with MasterCard tomorrow, so that's what's up next.
Fantastic. Well, good luck, Gareth, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. Do join me again next time for another fantastic episode of the Public Eye podcast. This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.